Hi, it's Nathan here, and today we're talking about sections 78 through 80 of the model WHS regulations, and these sections cover falls. The main requirement under the regulations, it's very general, very broad, is that you need to manage, eliminate or minimize the risk of falls. And then it says specifically falls are anywhere you could fall from one level to another. So if you can fall that far, you need to manage that risk. Now that doesn't mean you need handrails, but that's how broad this section is. It applies to anywhere you could fall, any distance. If you've ever heard working at heights is 2 meters, where that comes from is in the construction section of the regulations. And that is once you're over 2 meters, it becomes high risk construction work, which means you need a safe work method statement and like a system of how to do that safely. And then in a lot of states, not sure how many, but at least Queensland and New South Wales, they've added state-specific regulations for construction that says once you're over 2 meters, oh my goodness, we have a massive bee. Once you're over 2 meters, you need something physically stopping you, so something like from falling, so something like a handrail. So it's very broad. It brings, the section 79 then brings into regulation the hierarchy of controls for working at heights, which is similar to the hierarchy of controls for general safety, but for working at heights is one, we need to eliminate the need to work at heights. So for example, using things like extendable tools. There's an example of a guy who fell off a ladder while he was cleaning like second-story windows and died. And you know, he could have the business potentially could have had him using like an extendable pole. The next is work off a solid construction, which is probably difficult to implement, but obviously much safer than other methods. So imagine like silos, we have to get up on top of silos to look in there or do some work up there. We could just lean an extension ladder up onto it, right? That's one way to get up there. Could use an EWP, that's probably safer than the ladder, but once again, not as safe as a solid construction. So what would a solid construction be? You could build stairs, walkways, handrails, that's pretty safe. Yes, that's solid construction. Next is fall prevention device. So this is things like handrails or temporary work platforms like scaffold, temporarily erected scaffolding. Then we get to work positioning systems, which the most common ones we see are industrial rope access, which is very specialized. Not particularly, can't be safe. I mean, a lot of controls in place to make it safe, but you're essentially hanging off the side of a building by a rope, you know, so inherently risky. And then fall restraint, which is where you're wearing a harness, you've got a lanyard or a rope, but the idea isn't that the harness is going to catch you if you fall. The idea is the rope is too short to actually get to the edge, so it's restraining you from getting to the edge. And then and these are all in a hierarchy. So you're meant to not work at heights, then do solid construction, then have fall prevention device, then do work positioning, then do fall arrest, which is the least safe method, least preferred method. And you're only allowed to do these lower level ones if you can't do the higher level ones. Fall arrest, most common being fall arrest harness, or catch platforms, catch nets. So it's funny when we think about working at heights, everyone thinks harness, but that's actually the lowest level control. Before that, we need to consider all these other things like not working at heights to begin with, solid construction, handrails, work positioning system. So its application. This is a section of the regulations that is too vague to really be of much use. So you're going to have to lean on the code of practice, which I don't generally like doing because there is so many codes, as useful as they can be, that there's just so many of them that you can drown in codes. And if you go down the route of codes, generally you'll never come out. So this code is actually, the code is useful because some codes aren't. It'll expand upon each of those, you know, those hierarchies. So work off the ground, solid structure, fall prevention device, etc. Then it'll have sections on ladders, which are probably the most common fall hazard we see in workplaces. So practical examples, yeah, ladders. If you're using a ladder, refer to the code, talks about preference for platform ladders. If you're performing work off a ladder, which is okay, there's rules around it. Things like you're not doing heavy duty work off a ladder, you're not carrying loads up and down the ladder, maintaining 3 points of contact, which interestingly, ideally that third point of contact is going to be your other hand, so you can take one hand off to do a task, but It also says that leaning against the ladder can be a third point of contact. So you can get two hands off there, but obviously still your duties as a business are to ensure a safe workplace. So even if this person is maintaining 3 points of contact and they fall, arguably that system of work hasn't been safe enough to meet your legal duty. Other requirements for ladders are for extension ladders, which is fine using an extension ladder up to 6 meters to gain access during construction. Needs to be secure. The point where the person gets off, they need to have fall protection from that point, which is hard to implement in practice. Other fall hazards in construction, civil, residential, and commercial all have fall hazards everywhere. In civil, it'll be excavations, drop-offs, and in that case, it's sort of like ideally handrails or a hard barrier. If not, then at least some flagging and some signage to say, hey, stay away from here. Residential, work on roofs. As I said, yeah, most states have legislation that's once it's over 2 meters, you need something physically stopping you, but they then have exclusions saying that section doesn't apply up to 3 meters in housing, residential construction. But most residential housing sites, you'll see they'll just have handrails as standard, probably easiest rather than going down the route of, oh, well, this is less than 3 meters. And then there's rules around roof pitch as well. So yeah, just handrails if you can, if you're on a roof, is the safest bet. And then yeah, commercial construction is scaffolding, scaffold. And then there's a whole set of rules around that. A scaffold over 4 meters needs a high-risk license. They need inspections every 30 days, that sort of stuff. And there was an example a few years ago of some scaffolding coming down, a few people dying. So yeah, high-risk task, falls relevant for every workplace. You need to manage risk of falls from one level to another, regardless of height. And you sort of just need to think in a practical sense. So like we've been to loading docks before. They're a common one where it's like, what are you going to do? You can't really install permanent handrails because it's a loading dock. A truck needs to get in there. But then if you just have no handrails, it's like, well, now you've got an open ledge, and you'll see it at like, let's say half a meter where it's kind of like, yeah, we should try to manage that risk if we can. But if we can't, maybe some signage. And then you'll see other loading docks where it's like, okay, that's a meter and a half. If someone falls off that's not going to be great. So, okay, we need like a way to put some like temporary handrails in there. This section's also applied to safe access and egress. So the main one there is making sure our walkways, handrails, stairs all comply with Australian standards, which they should be in Australia. Like it's rare that I'll see something that looks like it doesn't comply with Australian standard, with the exception of stuff that's been imported from overseas. So I have seen it before with heavy equipment that's been imported and the stairs and handrails don't meet Australian standards. So that's the risk of buying stuff overseas. So they had to tear down they had to rebuild all the handrails and stairs on this massive piece of equipment. Other common fall hazards, work boxes are a common one. So the main one there is there's a bunch of rules for work boxes. That's like the cage, work cage, man basket. They put on a forklift, typically a forklift. Making sure it's been engineered. Someone just hasn't welded it, put it together. Making sure that it's connected to the forklift. They're the main ones. One of the leading causes of serious injury. It doesn't have to be a 10-meter fall to kill you. You can easily kill yourself from 2 meters. The duties under the regulations are very vague. Generally, we only audit against the regulations, but this is a case where we have to lean on the code because there's a lot of specific situations where people could fall, and the regulations basically just say manage this risk. Doesn't really help. That's it.